Hello to anyone who might be watching. I am very excited to be making this video today because what we have is a side-by-side review and comparison of two new for 2016 knives. This top one here being the full-size CRKT Jettison number 6130, and the bottom one is the Kershaw Intellect number 1810. And when I opened these two knives up and I got them next to each other, it just made a lot of sense to talk about them at the same time because there are a lot of similarities in the build and construction and materials used and just the types of knives that these are. So what we're going to do is just go over these two models and talk about the pros and cons of each, sort of go over all the details and all the nuances. And then at the end of the video, I will give my opinion and my preference and a recommendation if necessary. All right, so jumping into the basic specs of the knife, I'm going to list the full detailed specs in the description below. But what you can see when I put these knives next to each other is just that there is a length difference. Okay, so the Jettison up top here has a blade length that's just over 3 inches long and a total length of about 7 3/4 inches, while below the Intellect's blade length is sub 3 inches and has a total length of about 6 3/4 inches. And the reason why that is extremely relevant is not just for EDC purposes and what your size preference is, but also because the weight on these two knives is very similar. Okay, so the Jettison weighs in at 4.54 ounces on my scale, and the Intellect weighs in at 4.34 ounces. And you would expect if two knives were comparable in weight that the larger one would weigh a proportionate amount more, and that's really not the case here. So what that tells you is that in terms of density, that this knife, the Intellect, is a lot heavier than the Jettison. Now, both of the knives aren't particularly light. They're stainless steel frame locks, so they are going to be a little bit heavy, but the Intellect is just a little bit more dense and heavier. Okay, so like I said just a second ago, these are stainless steel frame locks, so you can see that here. Okay, and both of these knives also have very nice deep carry pocket clips. The Intellect on top here has that newly rolled out deep carry pocket clip that Kershaw's using a lot now. It is completely concealed in the pants, as you can see there, with that nice big loop over. The Jettison has a deep carry clip as well, with a nice loop over also, but there is a little bit of real estate poking out, but nothing major. The only difference in the clips, though, is that the Jettison's is one position, so right side tip up, while the Intellect's is tip up only, but it is right or left side. Okay, but we'll talk about more the clip and the carry in a bit. Let's get back to the blades for just a second and talk about the materials used, because both of these knives have 8CR13 MOV. So they are Chinese produced, and I have absolutely zero issue with that steel. I actually prefer it to AUS 8. I think that it's a very good soft steel that takes a wicked edge and is perfectly suitable for EDC applications. So 8CR13 MOV, again, no issues at all. The blade shape and design for these knives, even though there is this big different kind of thumb ramp, and the lines down the knife are very different than the Intellects here. It is a very similar style of cutting edge with a little more belly on the Intellect. But again, these are both EDC style blades. Okay, and moving on to opening and closing. So this knife, the Jettison, is a flipper, manual action only, no thumb studs. And when I opened this knife, I was extremely shocked that it was not running on the IKBS ball bearing system. And the reason why I was shocked is just because of how smooth it is. Let's see if I can get this focused on the washers here. All right, so this is running on plastic washers. There we go. All right, so you can see the plastic washers in there. and it is remarkably smooth for the fact that it is running on those. It really reminds me of the Ontario Rat 1 and the Rat 2, just in that those knives glide open like they're on air, and they're running on plastic washers as well. So one more time, I'll open the knife. Very, very smooth, nicely opens, locks up perfectly. Bit of a blade centering issue here with just a little bit off to the side, but again, not a huge deal. It's not rubbing, obviously, because it wouldn't be able to open as well as it does. I'm pretty sure I could fix the centering issue, but again, I wanted to show this knife as it came from the factory. Okay. And then over here with the Intellect, we have the Kershaw SpeedSafe opening mechanism. So it is assisted. Also, no thumb studs, so the only way to open this knife is with the flipper. It flips open pretty well. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, and in a very recent review I talked about how the Kershaw Weston SpeedSafe mechanism was on par with a lot of the American-made knives. This one, that's not the case, but it's perfectly adequate for what it is and for a budget EDC. Okay? One issue that I will say there is although the lockup is very safe and secure, no side to side or up and down, there is a ton of lock stick. Now I'm going to see if I can get that sound of the lock disengaging on camera. So hold on one quick minute while I try to do that. Not sure if you're going to be able to have heard that pop, but I mean, it takes a lot of pressure to disengage that lock. So, that's something that can be fixed as well, but again, I wanted to leave that just so you could hear that as well. We have very nice blade centering on this knife though. Okay. So that's basically our difference in lockup. All right, and we're going to move on to just overall fit and finish, and that is where the CRKT Jettison is a very big win. I did say it loses a couple minor points for the lack of blade centering, but overall this knife is really nicely built. I like the custom pivot screw here, but overall I just really like the solid, simple frame construction. Every aspect of this knife, the way that it's put together, the way it opens and closes, it just feels like a higher quality knife than what it is. And I'm no big fan of backspacers, but this backspacer is nice. It looks good. It was completely flush when I got it. I think I dropped the knife at one point and it got a little bit of a ding right here, but no, the backspacer is nice as well. Again, it feels like a higher quality knife than what you're paying for, and that's definitely a good thing. And also with the fit and finish, we've got a nice stonewash on these handles, very nice stonewash. So it's just a very attractive knife, and it looks very, very pretty. And again, I think in terms of the aesthetics and the fit and finish, you get a lot of bang for your buck there. Fit and finish on this knife, the Intellect. There is a bit of a sharpness on the spine here. I'm having trouble focusing, so excuse me if I'm moving these blades in and out. I'm just trying to isolate so I can get a better picture for you. There's a bit of a sharpness here on the spine, which is to be expected from a budget knife. At least you have the jimping, which is good. Overall, the fit and finish isn't really nothing terrible. You can see the open frame construction as opposed to the backspacer for the Jettison. I definitely prefer the open frame. Nothing fancy on the standoffs, but it is a lot easier to clean. One thing I will say real quickly though about the Jettison is that while there is a backspacer here, it's not completely closed off, so you could clean this knife off fairly well as well. All right, but back to the Intellect. One thing about the fit and finish that is a huge sort of, not an issue, but a curiosity, is that there is a liner on this stainless steel frame lock knife. Do you see that? On the top there? I'll show you the other side too. It has a liner. And I mean, that's got to be some kind of construction issue or something with the hardware being cheap or something about pieces not fitting. I don't know. For the life of me, I can't figure out why there would be a liner in a stainless steel frame lock. It definitely doesn't need the support. So if you have any insight to something like this, or if you've seen this before, let me know in the comments down below. I would definitely appreciate it. As it is now, I'm trying to rack my brain to figure out if I've ever seen something like this before, and I really can't remember. So I'm sure it's come up before, but yeah, I can't remember what knife or what model I've ever seen it on. So again, that's just sort of a nuance that, I don't know, I can't really explain. All right, let's move on to the ergonomics, because the ergonomics here are the biggest issue with these knives. All right, and they're sort of going to decide, for the most part, what my preference is. Okay, because heavy knives and stainless steel frame lock knives can be fantastic, as long as when you put them in your hand, some of that extra weight evaporates because they're so comfortable. And that's what happens with this Intellect. You put it in your hand, and even though it's a smaller handle because it's a smaller knife, you have a powder coating here on the handle that gives you a little bit of grip, not much traction, but just a little bit to keep it from being too slick like the blade would be. You've got this jimping, which isn't perfect. It's a little bit sharp, but again, it gives you traction. You've got the guard from the flipper and a little choil. So basically, when you're putting this knife in your hand, you know this is how my hand should go. This is what the position of my hand needs to be in this knife. Whether you have big hands or small hands, you know you're going to have your forefinger here, and you're going to go back from there. And whether you want to choke down or choke up, I mean, you have a good firm grip, and you have an understanding of what the ergonomics of this knife are meant to be. And it's comfortable. It's perfectly comfortable, and it's a knife that you can feel like you're going to get a lot of work done with. So again, like, good job on the ergonomics of this knife overall. I'm thrilled about it. But with the Jettison, that's where we have our biggest issue. Because there is no kind of traction whatsoever on this knife. We're smooth all the way from the back to the front. And although we have this thumb ramp, there's, again, no jimping to give you any kind of like texture or support. You have extremely slick stone washed handle scales. Extremely slick frame here. Okay, and then while you have the guard down here, there's no choil, or there's no spot that says this is where this finger should go. You know, and you can choke up here, but it's a little too close for comfort with where the blade begins. So this choil, if that's what you want to call it, is not big enough for your forefinger. And here it's just where does it go? You know, and that's my big issue. Like, where does everything go? Because I can get a good, comfortable grip, but if this is an EDC knife, and it is, I mean, there's nothing else you're going to use it for. It's too heavy and maybe too big to be a gentleman's knife, and it's definitely not a bushcraft knife or an outdoors knife or a tactical knife. This is an EDC knife. It's not a knife that you really want to do a lot of work with. I don't get it. And I'll never use this knife because, I mean, look, I'm trying to hold the knife in my hand as it is, and my finger's already sliding back. You know, I can't get a good secure grip. And any person could just walk up to me right now and pull the knife out of my hands. You know, as much as I hate to say it, because this was without a doubt the most, like, for me, the most anticipated knife by CRKT for 2016. I fell in love with this, with the look of this knife and this design from the get-go. And it's beautiful, it is. But in terms of function, it's not usable for me. So I don't know what I'm going to end up doing with this knife, but I'm not carrying it anymore. I carried it a few days and just really couldn't do it. So yeah, I think obviously at this point you can understand what my preference is. It's pretty clear that, you know, while this Kershaw Intellect is no real home run, it's, I think, a preferable EDC to the Jettison. All right, you know, if we're looking at just a pretty knife and fit and finish, the Jettison is the top dog, but the Intellect is one that can actually get the job done and get work done. So it would have been nice to have, you know, this level of build and craftsmanship on the Intellect, and then you'd have a win across the board, but that just isn't the case. So again, I can recommend the Intellect as a cheap budget EDC. The Jettison, not so much. So again, guys, thank you for tuning in. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, please let me know in the description down below. But I always appreciate your time, and tune in soon to my next videos because I'm going to be doing a giveaway for this Kershaw Intellect, and there's a lot of other good stuff coming as well. So take care and have a good one.